I have always trusted paper more than people. Paper does not raise its voice. It does not look away when you ask a direct question. It simply lies there, quiet, white, patient, and waits for you to read what has already been decided. That morning, February 12, 2024, 7:40 a.m., I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of oversteeped black tea and 3 envelopes spread in front of me. The table was the same one my wife, Margaret, had insisted on buying back in 1998. A heavy oak thing that took 4 movers and 1 broken toe to get inside. I still remember the argument about it. She won, as she usually did. The kettle clicked softly behind me. The refrigerator hummed like an old man clearing his throat. Everything was familiar, except the numbers. Transfer completed. $82,500. The statement was printed in that cold corporate font that banks seem to favor. Clean, precise, without emotion. The kind of font that makes theft look like routine. I adjusted my glasses and read it again. Date, February 9th, 2024. From savings account 3381 to external account, verified beneficiary. Authorization, signed document in branch. In branch, I repeated out loud. My voice sounded smaller than usual. I live alone. I have lived alone since October 3rd, 2021. The day we buried Margaret under a gray sky that couldn't decide whether it wanted to rain or not. Since then, my routines have been stable, predictable, controlled. I go to the bank once a month, always on a Tuesday, always at 10 a.m. I speak to the same teller, a young woman named Elise who smells faintly of vanilla and hand sanitizer. February 9th was a Friday. I don't go out on Fridays. I turned the page. There it was again, signature on file. Harold Whitaker. I stared at the looping letters. The H had that slight upward tilt. The W dipped lower than it should. It looked like my handwriting. It looked exactly like my handwriting. And yet, I didn't sign this, I said. The words landed in the kitchen and stayed there unanswered. A sharp knock came from the front door. 3 quick taps, impatient, familiar. Daniel, he doesn't ring the bell. Says it's too formal. I folded the statement carefully, aligning the edges the way Margaret used to, and slid it back into the envelope. By the time I reached the door, my face had already arranged itself into something neutral. Dad, you're up early, Daniel said as he stepped inside without waiting for invitation. He smelled of expensive cologne and cold air. February had teeth that year. I'm always up early. Right. He dropped his keys on the hallway table. The same table he'd nearly broken when he was 12, climbing it to change a light bulb without telling me. Some habits never change. He walked into the kitchen like he owned the place, opened the fridge, took out the orange juice I buy once a month and only drink halfway. You need to stop buying the cheap brand, he said, pouring himself a glass. It's basically sugar water. I like it, I replied. He shrugged. Your money. I watched him drink, watched the way he didn't ask, didn't hesitate. Daniel, I said, keeping my voice even. Did you go to the bank on Friday? He didn't even pause. Yeah. For what? He set the glass down, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Margaret hated that, and turned to me with a look I've come to recognize over the past 2 years. Patient, controlled, slightly annoyed. Dad, he said, you signed the transfer, remember? No, I replied. I don't. A beat. Then a soft exhale, like I just confirmed something inconvenient. We talked about this, he said. Last week, Tuesday evening. I came over. We went through the documents together. You said you wanted to help with the expansion. Expansion. My business. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The logistics warehouse in Newark. I showed you the projections, the contracts. You were actually pretty excited. I felt something cold settle behind my ribs. I don't remember that conversation. Daniel leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. Dad, he said slowly, you've been forgetting things lately. There it was, not an accusation, not directly, just a suggestion. I forget where I put my keys sometimes, I said. I don't forget signing $82,000 away. It wasn't signing away. It's an investment in your company, in our future. The way he said our made my jaw tight. I walked back to the table, pulled the statement out again, and placed it in front of him. Show me where I agreed to this. He barely glanced at it. Bottom of page 3, he said. I flipped it open. There it was. My name, my signature. dated, witnessed, perfect, too perfect. I didn't write this, I said quietly. Daniel laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly, just enough to make me feel old. Dad, he said, shaking his head, you really don't remember? Silence stretched between us. The refrigerator hummed again. Somewhere outside, a car passed slowly over wet pavement. I looked at the signature, then at my hand, the same hand that had wired entire buildings, balanced accounts down to the cent signed paychecks for 38 years without a single discrepancy. Could a hand forget? Could a mind erase something like that? Maybe, I said, the word tasting unfamiliar. Maybe I was tired. Daniel's shoulders relaxed slightly. Exactly, he said. That's all it is. You've been under stress on everything. He stepped closer, placing a hand on my shoulder. Warm, heavy, possessive. I'm just helping you manage things, he added. That's all. I nodded, slowly, because arguing would mean I was certain. And I wasn't. Not anymore. I folded the paper again. But this time my fingers weren't steady. For the first time in my life, I looked at my own signature and wondered if it belonged to someone else. If you believe older voices still matter, support this channel with a like and a subscription. By Monday, I had convinced myself it was nothing. That is how these things begin, not with certainty, but with small, reasonable explanations that fit just well enough to be believed. I made oatmeal that morning, the cheap kind in the cardboard cylinder. The one Margaret used to say tasted like wet newspaper if you don't respect it. I added half a banana, sliced carefully, the way she used to. Old habits. They survived longer than people. At 9:15 a.m., I sat in my armchair by the window with my checkbook, a calculator, and the February statements spread across my lap like evidence I wasn't ready to examine. $82,500. I wrote the number down. Then I subtracted it from the total balance. Then I checked again. Numbers still behaved the way they always had. Clean, honest, predictable. It was everything around them that had started to feel unreliable. At 10:02 a.m., my phone rang. Dad, Daniel said, without greeting. Did you look at the documents I left? I looked at the statement. A pause. Okay, he said. And I don't remember signing it. Another pause, longer this time. I could hear something in the background. A keyboard. Fast typing. His wife, probably. Laura works from home. Marketing, I think. Or something adjacent to it. Always on calls. Always busy. Dad, Daniel said finally, his tone tightening just slightly. We went through this. I know what you said. So what's the problem? I looked down at the paper again. My name stared back at me with irritating confidence. The problem, I said, choosing each word carefully, is that I don't forget things like that. Well, you do now. The sentence landed harder than it should have. I leaned back in the chair, the leather creaking under my weight. Since when? I asked. Since the last few months, he replied quickly. Too quickly. You've been repeating yourself, misplacing things. You asked me twice last week what day it was. I was making conversation. You asked at 9 a.m. and then again at 9:20. That doesn't mean. It means you're not as sharp as you used to be, Dad. There it was again. Not an insult. Not openly. Just a slow adjustment of reality. I rubbed my temple. And because of that, I said, I'm signing away $80,000 without remembering it. It's not signing away, he snapped. Then softer. Look, I'm trying to help you here. Silence stretched between us. You remember the Roth account? He continued. Back in November? You signed the adjustment papers then too. I did. Exactly. I remember that. Well, he said, exhaling. You didn't remember it at first. I had to remind you. That stopped me. I searched my memory. November. The bank. A young man in a gray suit. A pen that didn't write properly the first time. I remembered shaking it slightly before signing. Clear. Precise. I remember, I said slowly. Now you do, Dana replied. That's my point. I didn't answer. Because for a brief, unpleasant moment, I wasn't entirely sure. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, listening to the ticking of the wall clock Margaret had bought at an estate sale in 2007. It had a faint crack across the glass, barely visible unless the light hit it just right. I used to know exactly when that crack appeared. Now, I wasn't so certain. At 12:30 p.m., I opened the second envelope. Another transfer. $47,200. Date, January 28th, 2024. Authorization. Signed document in branch. My chest tightened. 2 transfers. Total. $129,700. I stood up too quickly, the room tilting just slightly before settling back into place. No, I said out loud. No, no. I walked to my desk, Margaret's old writing desk, still smelling faintly of her lavender polish, and pulled open the bottom drawer. Inside was a folder labeled Major Transactions, 2023 to 2024, neatly organized, chronological. My system. I flipped through it. Receipts, confirmations, notes in my handwriting, and then 3 documents I did not remember, each with my signature, each transferring money. $25,000, $18,500, $39,000, all to the same beneficiary, Daniel Whitaker. I sat down slowly. The chair felt harder than usual. 5 transfers, over $200,000, and every single one signed by me, or at least that's what the paper said. I picked up one of the documents, studying the signature again. The curve of the H, the pressure on the downstroke, the slight hesitation before the final line. It was mine. It had to be mine, unless a thought crept in, quiet, unwelcome. What if Daniel was right? What if this wasn't theft? What if it was worse? What if I was forgetting? I looked around the room, the books, the clock, the photograph of Margaret smiling at something just outside the frame. Everything was where it should be. Everything made sense, except me. And for the first time since she died, I wasn't sure I could trust my own mind. The 3rd time I went to the bank that month, they stopped smiling. It was February 19th, 10:03 a.m., a Tuesday, exactly as it should be. The air inside the branch smelled of polished floors and stale coffee. Everything was in place. The small American flag on the counter, the plastic tray with chain pens, the quiet hum of printers working through other people's problems. Elise wasn't there. Instead, a young man with a name tag that read Kevin looked up at me with polite uncertainty. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" "I need to review some documents," I said. "Transactions, in-branch authorizations." He nodded, already typing. "Of course. Account ending in 3381. "Yes." Clicking, scrolling, a slight tightening around his eyes. "I see the transfers," he said. "Is there an issue?" "I didn't sign them." The sentence came out flatter this time, less emotional, more procedural. Kevin hesitated. "Well," he said carefully, "all of these were completed in person, with identification and signatures verified. I'd like to see them." Another pause, longer. "I'll need to get my manager." Of course he would. I sat in one of the plastic chairs near the desk. It creaked under me, loud enough to turn a few heads. Across the room, a woman argued quietly about overdraft fees. Somewhere, a phone rang and wasn't answered. Normal life, ordinary problems. And there I was, trying to prove I hadn't erased $200,000 from my own memory. The manager arrived 5 minutes later. I recognized her, Marion Cole, late 40s, sharp haircut, the kind of woman who speaks in complete sentences even when she's angry. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, extending her hand. "I understand you have concerns. I want to see the documents I supposedly signed." "Of course." She sat across from me, a thin folder already in her hands. Prepared. That bothered me. She opened it with practiced calm and slid the first document across the desk. January 28th. My signature. Then February 9th. Again, each page clean, each line precise, each signature undeniable. "You were here in person for all of these," she said. "I was present for 2 of them myself." I looked up sharply. "You remember me being here?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "You came in with your son." "Daniel." "Of course. He assisted you with the paperwork," she continued. "You seemed comfortable with the process." "Comfortable?" I repeated. "Yes." My fingers pressed against the paper. "Did I say anything unusual?" She considered that. "No," she said, "but your son did most of the talking." A quiet, unpleasant detail. "And the signatures?" I asked. "You verified them?" "Yes. They match your signature on file." I let out a slow breath. "There's no mistake?" I asked. "No, Mr. Whitaker." "Certainly. Clean. Final. Paper doesn't argue." I nodded, as if that settled something. It didn't. "Is there anything else I can help you with?" Marion asked. I hesitated. There's one thing, something that had been sitting at the edge of my mind since yesterday. A small technical detail. The kind of thing people overlook when they trust appearances. You have cameras, I said. Marianne blinked. Security cameras, I continued. In branch. Yes, of course. I want to see the footage. That was the first time she looked uncomfortable. I'm afraid that's not standard procedure, she said. Access to recordings requires a formal request, usually from law enforcement. Then consider this a formal concern. Her tone cooled slightly. Mr. Whitaker, are you alleging fraud? The word hung between us. Fraud. I glanced down at the signatures again. Perfect. Too perfect. I don't know what I'm alleging, I said honestly. That's the problem. Silence. Then she closed the folder. If you believe there's been unauthorized activity, she said, you can file a dispute. But I need to be clear. These documents indicate full consent. Consent. Such a clean word. I stood up slowly. Understand, I said. And I did. That was the worst part, because everything on paper said my son was telling the truth. Everything, except the part of me that refused to believe I had simply forgotten. As I walked toward the exit, I caught my reflection in the glass door. An old man, slightly hunched, careful steps, forgetful, easy to guide, easy to manage. I stopped for a moment, hand on the door. And for the first time, the thought didn't feel like a question. It felt like a warning. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I sat in my car in the bank's parking lot, engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel like I had somewhere to go, but couldn't remember where. The sky was low and gray. February had that way of pressing down on everything, flattening colors, dulling edges. Even the cars looked tired. Fraud. The word Marian used. It lingered in my head, heavy and inconvenient, because fraud required intent, and intent required clarity. I had neither. At 10:47 a.m., I took out my phone and scrolled to a number I hadn't called in over a year. Martin Klein, attorney, estate planning, occasional drinking companion. Back when Margaret was still alive and insisted I maintain at least one friend who argues for a living. He picked up on the third ring. Well, he said, either you're in trouble or I am. Martin, I said, I need a favor. A pause. That bad, huh? Yes. We met at 12:15 p.m. in his office downtown. Same building. Same smell of old carpet and expensive paper. His secretary, Linda, gave me a look that hovered somewhere between concern and curiosity. Mr. Whitaker, she said softly. It's been a while. It has. Martin didn't waste time with pleasantries. What's going on? He asked, closing the door behind me. I placed the documents on his desk. One by one, neatly aligned, he adjusted his glasses and began reading. No interruptions. No commentary. Just the occasional shift in his posture. When he finished, he leaned back. That's a lot of money, he said. $212, $200, I replied. He nodded slowly. And you're saying you didn't sign any of these? I'm saying I don't remember signing them. That's not the same thing. I'm aware. Silence settled between us. Martin tapped the top page with his finger. Your signature, he said, consistent across all documents. No obvious forgery. I've spent 40 years signing my name, I said. Consistency isn't a miracle. No, he agreed, but imitation at this level usually leaves traces. Usually. He studied me for a moment. How's your memory, Harold? There it was again. I almost laughed. That seems to be the popular question this week. I'm serious. So am I, said. I forget small things. Names. Where I left the remote. I do not forget signing over $200,000. Martin nodded, but not completely. And your son, he asked. Daniel says I signed everything, that we discussed it. And did you? I don't know. The admission tasted bitter. Martin leaned forward, folding his hands. All right, he said. Let's assume two possibilities. One, you signed the documents and genuinely don't remember. That's a medical issue. And two, you didn't sign them, he said. In which case, someone else did. We both knew who. The room felt smaller. The bank says I was there, I added, with Daniel. Manager confirmed it. That complicates things. They won't show me the camera footage. Martin's eyes sharpened slightly. Of course they won't, he said, not without pressure. Can you apply it? A pause. Yes, he said finally. But before I do, I need to ask you something very directly. I nodded. If we get that footage, he said, and it shows you sitting there, signing those documents. What then? I didn't answer immediately, because I had already asked myself that question. In the car, in the kitchen, in the quiet moments between thoughts. What if Daniel was right? What if this wasn't betrayal? What if it was something worse? Loss. I need to know, I said. Martin held my gaze for a long second. Then he nodded. All right, he said. We'll request the footage formally. If they refuse, we escalate. How long? A few days, he replied. Maybe less if I push. I stood up, feeling older than I had that morning. At the door, I hesitated. Martin, I said. Yes. If I did sign those papers. He waited. I need you to tell me, I finished. Honestly, he didn't soften it, didn't dress it up. Of course, he said. I nodded and stepped out into the hallway. But as I walked toward the elevator, one thought pressed harder than the others. Not fear, not doubt, something quieter. If the cameras showed the truth, then either I was losing my mind or I was about to lose my son. They called on Thursday, 3:18 p.m. I remember the time because I had just finished washing a single plate, the same one I'd used for lunch, and was drying it with a towel Margaret had embroidered sometime in the early 2000s. Small blue flowers in the corners, slightly uneven stitching. The phone rang once, twice. Mr. Whitaker? Mary Ann's voice. Yes. We've received a formal request from your attorney regarding security footage. I expected that. A pause. We can arrange a viewing, she said carefully. Tomorrow morning, 9:30 a.m. You and your legal representative. I'll be there. Another pause. Her tone shifted just slightly. Mr. Whitaker, I want to be clear. The footage typically confirms what the documents already show. I understand, but I didn't hang up right away. Neither did she. There's no mistake? I asked almost out of habit. Silence. Then, we'll review everything tomorrow. The line clicked dead. Martin was already there when I arrived. 8:55 a.m. too early. That was intentional. I don't like being rushed into reality, he said when I walked in. Neither did I. They led us into a small conference room. No windows. A rectangular table. A screen mounted on the wall. The kind of room where decisions get made quietly and documented later. Marion entered last, carrying a tablet. Footage from January 28th, February 9th, she said. Those are the primary transactions in question. Primary, as if there were minor ones too. I sat down, slowly. Martin took the chair beside me. Whenever you're ready, Marion said. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. She tapped the screen. The video flickered to life. Black and white, slightly grainy. A wide angle from above the customer desk. Timestamp. January 28th, 10:14 a.m. The door opened. A man walked in, older, slightly hunched. Dark coat. Me. I felt something tighten in my chest. There, Marion said softly. I didn't answer. The man, I approached the desk. Sat down. Daniel entered right behind. Confident. Relaxed. Like he belonged. He placed a hand briefly on my shoulder. A familiar gesture. Possessive. The banker, Kevin, sat across from us. Papers were placed on the table. Words were exchanged, though the footage carried no sound. Zoom in, Martin said. Mary Ann adjusted the frame. Now I could see it more clearly. Daniel leaned forward, speaking. Kevin nodded. And me? I just sat there. Still. Too still. Pause, I said. The image froze. I leaned closer to the screen. My hands were on the table. Folded. Not moving. Play it, I said. The video resumed. Daniel turned a page. Pointed to something. Then, slowly, he reached for the pen. I felt my breath catch. No, I whispered. He didn't hand it to me. He didn't wait. He simply lowered his head slightly, positioned the paper closer, and began to write. My name, my signature, calmly, carefully, like he'd done it before. The stroke of the H, the curve of the W, even the hesitation before the final line. Perfect. Too perfect. No, I said again, louder now. On the screen, Kevin looked up briefly, saw it, and looked away. Just looked away. Daniel finished, slid the paper forward. Kevin stamped it. Approved. Routine. Stop, Martin said sharply. The video froze again. The room was very quiet. No hum. No movement. Just the image of my son signing my name while I sat beside him like a piece of furniture. I started. But the sentence didn't finish. because there was nothing left to explain. I wasn't signing, I said finally. I wasn't doing anything. Martin's voice was low. No, he said. You weren't. I turned to Marianne. Her face had lost all professional smoothness. That employee, Martin continued, just witnessed identity fraud and processed it. Marianne swallowed. We'll investigate internally. No, Martin cut in. You'll do more than that. I didn't hear the rest, because I was still looking at the screen, at Daniel, at the way his hand moved. Steady, practiced, confident. Not nervous, not hesitant. Like this wasn't the first time. Like it was normal. And the worst part? I hadn't stopped him. I hadn't even noticed. I sat back slowly. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then I said, very quietly, he didn't even need me to forget. Silence. I looked at my own frozen image on the screen. An old man, present, aware, and completely erased. I was there, I said. My voice didn't shake, but I wasn't included. By the time we left the bank, it was already over. Not legally, not on paper, but in the only place that still mattered. Martin was talking, something about filings, injunctions, immediate account freezes, but his voice came to me as if through a wall. Clear words, distant meaning. Criminal liability, employee negligence. We move fast, Harold, very fast. Yes, I said. I don't remember if it was the right moment to say it. Outside, the air felt sharper than it had the day before. Or maybe I was just noticing it again. First thing, Martin continued as we reached the parking lot. We freeze every account connected to you. Personal, joint, everything. Then we file for an emergency injunction. He won't be able to move another dollar. He already moved enough, I said. Martin didn't argue. That's not the point. It wasn't. But it was. At 11:42 a.m., I called Daniel. I didn't warn him, didn't think about it. I just pressed the button. He answered on the second ring. Hey, Dad, he said. Casual, light. What's up? I saw the footage. Silence. Not confusion. Not surprise. Silence. What footage, he asked finally. The bank, I said. January 28th. February 9th. Another pause. Longer this time. You went to the bank, he said. With my attorney. That changed something. I could hear it. A shift. Small. Precise. Okay, he said slowly. And I watched you sign my name. No anger. No accusation. Just a statement. Flat. Clean. Like paper. He exhaled. Dad, he said, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You were there, he insisted. You agreed to everything. I just helped with the paperwork. You signed it. I executed it, he corrected quickly. There's a difference. I closed my eyes for a moment. There it was. Not denial. Just language. You forged my signature, I said. No, he snapped. I acted on your behalf. I did not give you that authority. You did, he said. Maybe you don't remember, but you did. The same line. Again. But now it sounded different. Thinner. I was sitting next to you, I said. You didn't even ask for the pen. That's because we'd already discussed it. You didn't look at me, I continued. Not once. You just signed. Because I knew what you wanted. The first crack. Louder now. Sharper. You needed help, he went on. You still do. You're not managing things properly anymore. I stepped in. $200,000, I said. That's your definition of stepping in? It's an investment. In your company. In our future. The same word. Again, I let out a slow breath. There is no R, Daniel. Silence. Then a different tone. Colder. Fine, he said. You want to do this? Yes. After everything I've done for you? He asked. After I've been the one handling your accounts, your bills, I handled my life for 72 years without you. That was before he cut in. Things change. Yes, I said quietly. They do. Another pause. Then, what are you going to do? He asked. There it was. Not concern. Not guilt. Calculation. I've already done it, I replied. Your access to my accounts is revoked. My attorney is filing formal charges. The silence on the other end stretched longer this time. He won't win, Daniel said finally. You were there. There's documentation. Witnesses. There's video, I said. That landed. I could hear his breathing now. Slower. Measured. They won't use it, he said. The bank won't. They already did. A long, quiet second passed between us. Then he spoke again. Lower. Different. You're really doing this, he said. Yes. To your own son. I almost smiled. because that part still sounded rehearsed. You stopped being my son, I said, when you needed me to disappear in order to take my money. No answer. Just breathing. Then, you'll regret this. A familiar sentence. I'd heard it before, from different people, in different tones. I looked out at the empty street in front of my house. No, I said, I think this is the first thing I won't regret. I ended the call, and for the first time in weeks, there was no confusion, no doubt, no second-guessing, just a quiet, settled clarity. Paper had finally told the truth, and this time, I believed it. The hearing lasted 18 minutes. I timed it. Old habits. When you spent a lifetime measuring things, voltage, cost, time, you don't stop just because the context changes. 18 minutes to undo what had taken my son 3 months to arrange. We sat in a narrow courtroom that smelled faintly of dust and disinfectant. The kind of place where no one wins, only loses at different speeds. Daniel arrived late, not dramatically late, just enough to make a point. He wore a dark suit I didn't recognize. Expensive, well-fitted, the kind of suit you buy when you expect to be taken seriously. He didn't look at me when he sat down. That, more than anything, told me he understood. His lawyer did most of the talking. Words like authorization, assistance, misinterpretation. Clean words, carefully chosen, designed to smooth over something that was anything but smooth. Martin responded with fewer words, but heavier ones. Forgery. Unauthorized execution. Video evidence. That last one settled the room. You could feel it. The judge, a tired man with a voice that sounded like it had seen too many of these cases, adjusted his glasses and leaned forward. Mr. Whitaker, he said, looking at Daniel, did you sign these documents on behalf of your father? A pause. Small. Critical. Yes, Daniel said finally, but with his consent. Did you have legal power of attorney? No. Did you obtain explicit permission at the time of signing? Another pause. Less controlled this time. We had discussed it beforehand. That's not what I asked. Silence. And there it was. Not an explosion. Not a confession. Just absence. The absence of a valid answer. The judge nodded once, almost to himself. Accounts are to be frozen immediately, he said. All transferred funds subject to review and potential reversal. Further proceedings will determine criminal liability. Gavel. 18 minutes. Over. Outside the courtroom. Daniel finally looked at me. Really looked. For a moment, I saw something familiar in his face. Not kindness. Not remorse. Recognition. Like he was seeing me clearly for the first time in years. You didn't have to do this, he said. I adjusted my coat. Yes, I replied. I did. You could have just talked to me. I tried. No, he said, shaking his head. You assumed the worst. I almost laughed. I assumed exactly what I saw. His jaw tightened. It wasn't theft, he insisted. It was efficient. I offered. He didn't answer. Because that was the word. Efficiency. Remove friction. Remove delay. Remove the old man who asks questions. You were just sitting there, he said suddenly. He didn't even react. What was I supposed to think? I held his gaze. That I trusted you. That landed. Not loudly, but deeply. For a second, something shifted behind his eyes. Then it was gone. You've made a mistake, he said. You'll see that. I nodded. Maybe, I said. But it won't be this one. He exhaled sharply, turned, and walked away down the corridor. His shoes clicked against the tile. Measured, controlled. Just like always. He didn't look back. I didn't expect him to. By April, most of the money was back. Not all. Some had already been invested, moved, dissolved into things that no longer had clear edges. Martin said we'd recover more with time. Time. At my age, that word feels optimistic. The bank settled quietly. Internal review. Policy violations. The employee, Kevin, was no longer there. No apology. Just absence. It seems to be a theme. The house is quieter now. Not emptier. Just clearer. I still wake up at 6:00 a.m. Still make tea. Still sit at the same oak table Margaret chose all those years ago. The papers are still there sometimes. But they don't confuse me anymore. I read them carefully, line by line, because I've learned something simple. It wasn't my memory that failed me. It was my trust. And that's not something you lose by accident. That's something someone takes. Slowly, deliberately, signature by signature. I fold the documents neatly, just the way Margaret used to, aligning the edges with care. Then I set them aside, because some things, once proven, never need to be questioned again.